somebody like you for a long time. And you and Bob Grant and even Barry Gray has changed.
I say, cheer up your local liberal. We have to keep a few around for research, if not for breeding
Well, don't worry.
So the UN is the biggest disappointment to me personally. I remember, the Parliament of Man, the UN, which I thought was going to be the family of nations, has turned into a VIP lounge for cutthroats, gangsters, murderers, and dictators.
To us, and Israel has prevented the Russian bear from putting her paws on Arabian oil.
You really believe that? If the Russians really wanted to move in,
Well, why?
nobody has greater respect and love and affection for Israel than I do, and nobody has greater hatred for the Soviet Union than I do. But I cannot be a party to this unrealistic conversation. You're entitled to your opinion, but I just want to go on record as saying I do not sanction. And hello.
Hello, Mr. Grant.
Yes.
This is Dorothy from Montclair.
Uh-oh.
Mr. Grant, I'd like to discuss 2 points with you about the Middle East.
Yes, Dorothy.
If I may. One is about your discussion that you had yesterday about Mr. Arafat being recognized by many countries. And the other is about the letter that Ronald Reagan has sent to Menachem Begin. Do you have a preference as to which I discuss first?
It's up to you.
Okay. Let me discuss Arafat's recognition by certain countries. Your explanation yesterday was fine, except that I felt it was a little simplistic. For example, when Arafat was recognized by Japan, it wasn't because they thought he was a great leader.
I never said it was.
No, but that was one of the points.
I never said it was, Dorothy. I wish you'd relax a little bit, Dorothy.
Oh,
Dorothy, you call every week like you're sitting there from on high in judgment.
Bob, I'm upset. You have no idea.
Well, I do have an idea, Dorothy, because you tell me every week that you're upset.
Well, it's not every week, but believe me, this...
All right, every 2 weeks.
All right. Mr. Menachem Begin.
Yes.
Received from Ronald Reagan. I think the timing of that letter could not be worse. I am not privy to anything that Menachem Begin does, but I'll tell you one thing. Caspar Weinberger is there, and I am sure he will get the message. I have never seen a country treat an ally the way the United States Israel. It exerts the greatest amount of pressure against Israel. It doesn't pressure the Saudis to stop their embargo against the Israelis. I'm talking about their economic embargo. It doesn't tell the Saudis to stop financing and sending arms to the PLO. It only pressures Israel. You once accused me of being paranoid. You said Israelis or Jews are paranoid. I don't think they're paranoid. I think their reaction is an accurate reaction. Can't they?
I don't know of any truly paranoid person who goes around saying, I'm paranoid. To be paranoid, one says, I'm paranoid. Yes, that's true. But look, I can't help it that those guys are following me. On WMCA, we thank Dorothy.
Oh. They had this Dr. Caldicott on.
Oh, Helen Caldicott. You know what I want to do? I'm glad you mentioned her, Dorothy. Then I'll let you talk. I want to call Senator D'Amato.
Yes.
And find out what the heck this woman is doing in this country. She's not even a citizen. What the heck gives her the right to come to this country and stir up trouble?
Hold it, Bob. How do you like the way your mind and my mind are in complete tune? Why did I mention her? Because I react to her exactly.
I guarantee you, if I went to Australia, if I was a visitor in her country, I would keep my big mouth shut.
Well, Bob, you have to...
I don't want to... saying this to you is like putting gasoline on a fire. But you know what occurred to me?
What?
All the networks,
yes,
all the networks were leading their nightly news with the destruction in Lebanon a little over a year ago.
Yes.
Right now, they're tearing the second major city of that country apart.
Yes.
It's not at the top of the news. Isn't that interesting?
I know, but Bob, what can we do about the fact that they are playing this down and pretending it doesn't exist?
Well, you know how you could get them to put it at the top of the...
Yeah.
Tell them that the guys doing most of the damage are Israelis.
I know that.
And then it'll be at the top of the news.
Between him and Brandon Stoddard.
Well, Brandon Stoddard, I tell you, he's the guy that I would like to get I'd like to be alone in a room with Brandon Stoddard for just 2 minutes. And from the looks of him, all I'd need would be 1 minute.
And I'll tell you something. Dr. Caldicott, she's a doctor.
No, I swear, please, Nicole, remind me. I've got to call Senator D'Amato, find out if she's a citizen. If not, whether we can get her deported. Get her out of here.
The people that are born here, like that woman, I heard that woman today on Barry Gray's show. I tell you, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Who the hell do you think she is?
I found out why the conversation ended. The autographed photo of Yuri Andropov fell off the wall and hit her on the head. Thank you very much. WMCA. Hello.
Speaking of Jesse Jackson, if I may. First of all, before I come to the specific instance that you commented on November 28th, 83, in the Wall Street Journal, on the editorial page, they had an editorial about Jesse Jackson, and they commented on the fact that the organization that he heads, which is called PUSH, has been under federal audit for quite a while. There are several $1 million that cannot be explained. They also mentioned the fact that he had a very close tie with Libya, where money was exchanging hands.
Oh, I think a variety of reasons. I think there's a whole host of reasons. I know one national magazine referred to sloppy bookkeeping. That's pretty good. I would like everybody who's ever facing an indictment for embezzlement or anything like that to know that if anybody gets suspicious of you, you could just say you're guilty of sloppy bookkeeping. I mean, it's something that boggles the mind. But
if Jesse Jackson is on good terms with Syria and Libya and Iran, then he cannot be a friend, so far as I'm concerned, of the American people. Because those countries are countries that we have no relations with. This is Dorothy. Did you get a memo from me about UNESCO?
A memo? Do we work for the same company?
No, Bob, I sent you...
No, wait a minute. What do you mean a memo?
Well, I made a Xerox copy of something that I had read in a publication about the fact that last year UNESCO...
Oh, I get it. You had Xeroxed a memo. Yes, I got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
All right, as long as you got it. Bob, can I comment on Jackson for a minute?
Dorothy, could I refuse you?
No. All right, thanks, Bob. I'm not getting excited.
So far, you're not. I'm surprised.
All right. That's not nice, Bob. I'm not getting...
Well, now, wait a minute now. Dorothy, I have a little telemetry hookup here on your blood pressure.
Okay.
And I want you to know that if it starts getting too high, I'm going to go beep.
Okay, Bob. I'm going to control myself. Listen, Bob, first of all, the news article that said that Syria has picked up the tab for Jackson mentioned that they only paid for the hotel bill. What I want to know is who paid for 54 airline tickets, because I don't know how the group got back. I think that they were using...
Well, the group got back courtesy the American taxpayers.
But how did they...
The president provided return flight.
Okay, how did they get there? 54 people. Who paid for that? Good question.
Well, what I'd like to know is why 54 people? I mean, I can understand Jackson. I can understand maybe him wanting to take a couple of other people with him.
Yes.
But 54?
Yes, and I'll tell you who went along.
Well, Louis Farrakhan went along, and I don't know if you know who he is.
Well, I heard your explanation before. Is that...
Yeah, he's a black Muslim.
Yes.
Who was the man in charge of the mosque where Philip Cardillo was murdered, and a man who said such outrageous things about Cardillo, about the New York Police Department, that it's just, I wish I had a tape of what he said. It's just unbelievable.
All right, Bob, I want to tie in Jackson with the Libyan connection and Carter Mondale, because you had mentioned that before.
All right.
All right, there's a group, first of all, there are many pro-Palestinian groups, and Jackson and his group, PUSH, are very active in them. One of them is called the Palestinian Human Rights Campaign. One of the sponsors of that committee, which was formed, I think, in 1977, is a man by the name of Richard Shadiak, who is a Libyan agent, okay? In 1980, Shadiak stated that he was appointed to chair the Arab-American group to re-elect Carter Mondale. And that group is also sponsored by PUSH. In other words, Jesse Jackson, PUSH, many black groups, Black Theology Group, the Black Lawyers Group, black congressmen are all connected with this, they call it the PHRC, okay? And one of the sponsors is this Libyan agent.
Yes.
Now, and also he was appointed the head to re-elect Carter Mondale. Now, in 1979, they have annual conferences, and during that annual conference, they stated that they were forging new links. The black American group was forming new links with the Palestinian Arabs. The point I want to make is I could accept Jesse Jackson having a middle-of-the-road view, but Jesse Jackson does not. He is completely anti-Israel. What's been going on in Lebanon? The Syrians have murdered 241 American Marines. The Libyan government, not isolated Libyans, but the Libyan government today, shot at peaceful protesters in London. And let's put it this way, I think the British are getting what they deserve. They should not have had any diplomatic relations with Libya. Take the Iran-Iraq war, Bob. I don't know which side we should be on, because both sides are reprehensible. The Iraqis have been using chemical warfare, and the Iranians use 12-year-old kids to test the mines. So far as I'm concerned, the Arab world is the only world that has made war holy. They have something that's called a jihad, and that's a holy war. So how can we possibly be sympathetic to the Arab countries? They're different. They don't behave like we do. They're a different brand. They're a different breed. Take Farrakhan. He calls himself the Nation of Islam. And it's just another example. Now, they have a campaign, Bob, so that America will stop aiding Israel. They don't talk about the American aid that's given to Egypt. We give an equal amount of aid to Egypt.
You know, every time you think graffiti can't get any worse, it does.
Now, if we took prisoners and said that they had to do some duty on the subway trains and clean up the graffiti, then we have the ACLU saying that we're violating their civil rights.
Well,
right?
That's right.
Isn't that what would happen?
That's right. Cops have told me that they know who most of the graffiti perpetrators are, and yet they can't do anything about it.
Bob, will you?
I had suggested once in a bygone day that we take and cut their hands off. I said it facetiously to make a point.
I know.
And do you know that I had organizations confronting me? Suddenly, 1 million organizations were sprung up overnight to confront me with my horrible, horrible statement.
Bob, you're probably aware of it, but I want to mention it because I think it's so important. Every time there has been a kidnapping or a hostage-taking, when one or more hostages are released, there's a common theme through all of it, Bob. They give us the message from the kidnappers, from the terrorists. They speak sympathetically about the terrorists, and then the person who was released makes his own foreign policy statement. That's what Reverend Weir did. That's what Moorhead Kennedy did. You recall the Iranian crisis. That's what Jeremy Levin and his wife did when he escaped. And that's what and you recall Allyn Conwell, who was the spokesman, that's what he did. He gave us the message, and then he said we must change Mideast policy.
At least Allyn Conwell went away. The others that you mentioned are perennials.
That's right. They're around. They're at all the talk shows, and they speak well of Hafez Assad. They speak well of Amal, and of course, the Reverend Weir today said the same thing. At the end, he said, America must change its foreign policy, and he paused. It was a long pause. He said about Israel. But take Reverend Weir. Reverend Weir has been in the Arab world for 30 years. He speaks Arabic. He's a missionary. While he was kidnapped, his wife appeared on all the shows making pro-Amal statements, pro-Syrian statements, and she always stressed that we should change our policy. In addition, she kept insisting that Israel must release the detainees it was holding.
Yes.
Never mentioned the Kuwaitis.
No.
Am I right, Bob?
No, Dorothy, I'll tell you, it's It's appalling. It's incredible. Time and time again, it happens, and it will continue to happen. And I'm trying to look at it in a positive light, trying to find something, some little silver lining. And the lining that I find is that it hasn't really brainwashed the American public the way I had feared it would. Cringe to see someone like Benjamin Weir sit there before the cameras, right on the microphone, and say, they treated me with respect. I mean, how ludicrous can you get?
Look, Bob, there's something even more ludicrous. One of the men that the terrorists are holding is Perry Anderson, who was the chief of the Associated Press Beirut, in Beirut. He gave orders to his subordinates to present the Shiites in a favorable light. I have many clippings where the Israeli government was angry because they presented the Shiites and never showed anything that Israel was suffering.
Masochistic or incredibly brave, one or the other, maybe a little bit of both. You probably will subject yourself to America's great you-know-what station, first blah, blah, blah station.
Right.
Where their allegiance is clearly not to the United States of America, but to some entity that they feel is growing within our midst. I imagine they'll be playing funereal music, or
they are
beating drums. Since they can't play music, it'd probably be beating drums.
Bob, they sound very dejected. If they would only realize that this is really not a racial issue, our reaction is to crime.
Yeah, but to that bunch, everything is racial.
I know. I agree, Bob. Look, Bob, I'll write you and I'll talk to you.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Now, I think David Dinkins is a loser, because when David Dinkins discussed the happening in Central Park, he said what we have heard for 20 years. Let's look at the root of the problem. And I'm sick of that, and I think New Yorkers are sick of that. So I think that old cliche is finished, and I think David Dinkins will lose by it.
Isn't that interesting that Cagazote nerd, nothing ball, who's only there because he's black anyway, the guy that didn't file his taxes for year after year after year, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that putrid little nerd didn't say the same thing about Bernard Goetz? Why didn't he say when Bernard Goetz shot those thugs, why didn't he say, well, let's look at the root of the problem?
Bob.
Let's say hello to Dorothy from Montclair. Hello, Dorothy.
Bob.
Yes.
You said you didn't want to be here today. I need you. I've been chasing you for 2 or 3 days. I'm going to explode.
Well, I'm here.
Gracious lady from Montclair, Dorothy.
Well, there was a Dorothy from Montclair, but I hardly consider her vicious.
You know what black people are going to do about the black crime? I would like to say to her, if she watched last night Channel 13 PBS, where they portray, they feature a bunch of white criminals, rapists, murderers. I just want to say to her, if she watched last night Channel 13.
Why don't you call her and ask her and get a translator so she can understand you when you ask her. Either that or take out all the garbage you have in your mouth. Where are you from, pal?
I'm from Haiti, sir.
I'm sorry to hear that.